talk to the camera. Hello.
Oh, hi now.
Hi, Mark. This is Mark. Now, some of you will remember Mark because Mark, as in Mark and Claire, were here. Was it seven or eight years ago? Yeah. So, and then they went because people can only take so much.
We agreed to come for 2
years.
Yes. That's enough.
We had a non-disclosure agreement. They just went and no one spoke of it ever again. So what have you been doing in the last 7 or 8 years?
So
just the executive summary is fine.
Yeah, okay. I'll give you a very brief summary. So when we were coming here, when we were working with BMS, and I was working part-time
BMS?
for BMS.
What's BMS, you might ask? Oh, yes, we do know, really.
Yeah, so we stopped that at the end of, near the end of the pandemic, and I've carried on the glorious life of working part-time.
Oh, yeah.
And now I work part-time as minister of Yardley Wood Baptist Church.
Wood?
It was as close as we could get to Chelmsley Wood without being Chelmsley Wood.
Yes.
So we went to Yardley Wood Baptist Church, and Claire's and I are one minister between us. So we both work part-time. Claire's doing chaplaincy at the Women's Hospital for other part-time.
It's good.
And I'm still struggling away trying to finish a PhD.
Oh, we'll get to the PhD in a minute because it's a very interesting subject.
It is fascinating.
I think it is. So tell us a bit about Yardley Wood, because I know some of our people used to go to Yardley Wood, but most of our people won't, because Yardley Wood is one of the, a bit like Chelmsley Wood, I expect. Unless you go in there, you never go there.
No, you don't have a good
it's
reason
not
to be
on the
there.
way to...
It's on the way to Shirley shopping.
Is it?
So,
okay.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a church in some ways a bit like lots of churches, but we got there during the pandemic, so it was a bit of a weird thing. They'd been in interregnum, so that, we were without a minister for a little while, so not exactly on their uppers. But in the lockdown period, just before they'd started a local pantry.
Oh yeah, doing what? Like a food bank?
It's like a shopping cooperative. So you have a little shop in the church, you have membership, and people can come along and they pay their membership fees of what was then £4, it's now £5, and they do a little shop in the church. And normally speaking, you come away with, the difference between that and a food bank is that you come away with your choice of shopping within what's in there.
So I think we have something similar, the Around Again social supermarket.
Oh yeah.
So you go around, you can have, there's different areas, but it's really supported for people that are struggling a bit.
So ours is a social corner shop rather than a social supermarket.
Right.
It's a lot smaller, but it's
social
great.
Corner shop, knock off vodka and fags.
Yeah, unfortunately, what's left. so
no disrespect to any corner shop owners that may be watching.
But yeah, so we do that, and that's really grown. And we have twice a week we do that, which is just a lovely time of meeting folk. We have a place to welcome people, wait to get in the shops, we have that as the sort of two main things during the week, and we also do the church work.
Any good?
Do you know, it's surprisingly fun, actually. It's better than I remember it. We had 7 years out of not being ministers.
That's good.
Yeah, it's good.
It's good for us to be reminded that other churches are available. Don't go to them, obviously.
No.
Go to ours.
I wouldn't.
And also that other churches are doing stuff, because it's fairly unusual, particularly for smaller churches, because yours isn't a massive church, to be active in doing things. Often at a large church you go, we've got some resources spare now, let's do something for people. But smaller churches, I think you get more bang for your buck anyway. I think they're often more fired up and groovy about, and more flexible.
Yeah, and not so, they don't think they're brilliant, so they're just getting by.
We do now.
Yeah, I mean, you probably do, and you are.
Well, we are. That's because we are. We're not showing off. We're just realistic about.
Whereas we're not brilliant.
You're not.
I think Claire's comment was it's all a bit rubbish sometimes, but to any Yardley Wood people watching, she did say that in a service.
Shall I edit that bit out?
Yeah, possibly.
I'll edit that out.
Yeah, I bet you do.
I never edit that out. Because once it's done. Yeah.
It's that nice feeling of everybody's in the model, getting by, doing something that actually is really impressive, and you get local people. Like one guy came along recently, and he just said he's been coming for the last 3 years. He's now volunteers, and he just said, I was chatting with a friend who just said, oh, you've really changed. I've never noticed you being quite so confident in yourself. It's really nice to see. And he just said, oh yeah, it's just because I go along down to the pantry twice a week now, and it's doing me good.
That's
and it's
good.
just that. The nice thing is that how much that is celebrated by the people who come along. That, instead of thinking that's not much, it's really going, oh wow, that's brilliant.
That's
It's
good,
had an impact on Doug. So it's just a really nice mustard seedy,
I love that stuff because I think that's really what we're about. Because sometimes you get the impression churches are meant to be about worship on a Sunday morning, and I'm always wary of churches that their main drive in life is to be a worship centre and stuff. And I understand that God likes people to tell him how fab he is, that kind of stuff. But I'm sure God says, "All right, we've said it now, and now will you actually start doing something useful, please?" Yeah. When you see worship as an end in itself rather than worship, because worship is about acknowledging God's greatness, but it's also about you being transformed. If you encounter God, that should change you. So I love that stuff, and it's kingdom stuff.
Yeah, and it means as well that there are ways of running a shop, and especially a shop that's a bit of a charity. Because if you run a shop, you might just have to think, well, it's about the bottom line. If you're running a charity, you can make people feel like they're receiving charity. So the idea of running it in a kind of way that's informed by the grace that draws you to worship on a Sunday is that you might do it differently.
Yeah.
The real challenge is to make sure you're doing your worship in a way that hasn't been formed by, that isn't just an exercise in some form of individualism or something like that. So you've got to have that kind of circle that you want to do things in a way that does good. And maybe your worship sort of feeds into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting stuff, isn't it? Which does bring us neatly, does it not?
It does a little bit, yeah.
Because we were at was it this year with the Ministers' Conference, and I got Mark onto the subject of his PhD.
I bored so many people with this.
No, well, I was actually interested in it. So everyone else went off or fell asleep. Yeah. But can you? What is it? I know you've nearly finished, haven't you? Just another few weeks and it's done.
I've been saying that for the last 2 years. And it's one day it's going to be true as well, so that'll be glorious.
So what's it about?
So, right. I should say that people shouldn't ask that question.
What should I?
No, you should steer clear of it.
I see.
That's
what's your favourite colour?
But I'll just say what it's very briefly about is that there's a notion that sometimes Christians think that we are shaped by the ideas we have. So if you read the Bible, you get this drip effect. You get the right ideas, and gradually you learn to put them into practice.
Oh, so you absorb the story and you become the story.
Yeah, that sort of stuff.
I like that. Is that right?
No, well, it's better to absorb the story than it is to absorb some ideas.
Okay.
So that's been quite a nice development in recent years, isn't it? We used to say, get the 4 spiritual laws right, or just, get these key ideas into your head and then they will trickle down into your life. Whereas if you say you absorb the story, basically you're saying, I realise the world is a different place. I live in that story rather than the story someone else is telling me. And the coordinates of my world are informed by this, whatever story I tell. So if I'm telling the story, I don't know, about sort of capitalist economics, whatever, I think of myself as someone who's desperate to make some money. You know, and the key coordinates are, I don't know, McDonald's, whatever, ways in which the world works. If I was absorbing the biblical story, then the key coordinates, the things that shape my life might be, the cross, the resurrection. A key person might be Abraham, and when you get a funny call, you actually do something about it and you find that God is faithful. So you've absorbed the story, and the story is absorbing the world around you, it's reshaping it. I think that's great. But
that's not your dissertation, that's not your PhD.
No, that's just the background stuff that I'm trying to do a little criticism.
That's just the story.
That's just me getting started.
That's the story that shaped your PhD.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But what I want to say in the end is that it's not even, it's not what we think as Christians that changes us, but it's what we do about it. It's the things we do change us in different ways. So, you could say this thing about if you do communion, if you regularly, it's going to change you. In the past you might say, well, yeah, because then you hear the story or you get your ideas. But in actual fact, it might just be that very simple thing of holding a piece of bread and eating it and chewing it and attached to the story that God works in small things, but you're actually holding something small, you're hoping in something small, you're putting it in your mouth, you're chewing it over. And all of those things change something to do with who you are. And it's changed, you couldn't say why. Why is it a relief to hold a tiny piece of bread, and invest hope in it? Some people, in some traditions, why is it such a relief to light a candle and just think, I'm just going to pray for a while?
Yeah.
So there's all these bits that you do with your body as well as your head. And for lots of Christians, so for example in Yardley Wood, what's it doing, first of all, to you as a Christian to always be working with people to sort food out for people who otherwise won't have their shopping sorted, but to be doing it with them, so they're volunteering with you. All of those physical activities are changing you in some way. You're starting to learn to feel the world in a different way, and to say that the real shaping of a Christian is as much that as getting your ideas right. That it says once in the Old Testament, once in the New Testament, because it's a quote, but it says the Spirit falls on flesh. You do things, you have habitual things that you're always doing as a Christian, and to say the Holy Spirit's fallen on that, and in that you know God differently. You may never be able to put into words, unless you're writing a PhD on it, what you know, but you are really learning stuff about God, and it's that stuff that is most by doing.
We've been looking at Matthew's Gospel, and that seems to come up a lot. I don't know if it's just because it's in our heads or my head at the moment. The idea of it's about what you do, and the church historically has tried to make this dichotomy, isn't it? And it's made it very much about head knowledge. And Jesus talks a lot about what you do, and what you do, and here's where again it's not either or. What you are shapes what you do, but also what you do does shape what you are, isn't it? So we're big, as you'll know, things like communion. We want everyone having communion, the kids, the unbelievers, and if you're at the table of Christ, have communion is our view, which would be anathema to some traditions. Because for them, communion is so special they shouldn't have it, but for us, communion is so special
we
should have it. So it's a strange. So I guess partly it might depend on your personality. I guess.
But it probably does. But to some extent, that thing of saying we want all of us to have it is to say that whether you're a person of explicit faith or not, you might be encountering God, but in ways that you're never going to put into. You're never going to say out loud. You're never going to put it into sentences.
There's a word for that, isn't there? Isn't there a word for knowledge that you have without knowing that you know something?
Is it? I don't know. Wisdom.
No, it's a thing. It's a thing. We came across it in. I think it's linked with psychotherapy as well. This idea, and a lot of the womb stuff is about that. There's kind of pre-knowledge almost. You picked up, you know something, but you don't know you know it, but you just know it. And you couldn't explain that you know it. I
can only think of a Greek word for it, it's not going to help.
Oh, go on.
Practognosia.
That's
practical knowledge.
That's what I would have
practice
said.
And gnosia, that's,
But I think that is, maybe that's what words like intuition are trying to say, isn't it? This sense of what is good and what is not good. It's that you don't know, you can't put into words. But I think faith, well, maybe the West generally is very keen on with the emphasis on academia and head knowledge. That if you haven't got that, you're stupid. But actually, you're not. You can be deeply wise.
Exactly.
But not string a sentence together, but you still know stuff.
And that stuff that counts. It's that the sort of famous thing about someone who's lived in an area for ever such a long time. They know the mood of the area. They know how to get about. And you would stop and say, "Or tell me how to get from to the bank or to the butcher's or whatever it is." And they might be a little bit stymied if you didn't know the area, but they could walk. They know the shortest route there, and they would know what was important about that route as well. but they might not be able to say, oh yeah, take a left, take a right, take a, because they've never done it that way before.
This is that psalm, isn't it, that God knitted us in our mother's womb, that, God's deep knowledge of us, and perhaps we have a deep knowledge of God that's beyond our own understanding. We understand God in ways we can't express.
And I think in terms of the mission of the church, if the church thinks of itself in those terms, is that's what you're trying to impart. You're not trying if you're nothing against Danforth courses particularly, but you're not trying to get them to go through the content of a book. You're not
that information is a tool that's useful, but
but unfortunately for us, it's often become what we want to get over. You think, well, the only way to actually get the faith over is to teach it in some way, to have a little moment where you can say it out loud and very explicitly. Whereas in the instance of Doug, when he says, I'm being changed by coming here, and that's celebrated, the Christians in the room think God is involved in this. Now, to not be completely schizophrenic about it, every now and again it might be good to say to Doug, wow, we think God's doing that, what do you think? And not more than that, so that then Doug can say, well, no. Or Doug could say, it feels a bit like God, and it's a bit like this, and actually then Doug brings a bit of God into the room as well as you bringing a bit
maybe
of
that's our job as Christians, is to say to people, that might be God and that's God. We'll tell you all about God, say, well,
because I think that's the lovely thing, to think that something of what God is about comes from that other person. Just like Peter met Cornelius or Philip met the Ethiopian, these kind of things. And they went away knowing God differently. Not just the Ethiopian, but Philip. And that church then becomes a place of just saying, we love to sit around talking, but because we are us as well, we think that God's in this conversation. So from time to time, we're actually going to bring that up as well and just say, we think God's here. And then get surprised by what comes back. Because some people might just say, oh, I thought you're never going to talk about that. I've been thinking that for a while. And then other times they'll say, no, that's nonsense. And even that's a fun conversation to have, because you realise that. So my PhD is in the midst of all of that.
I like it. I mean, well, we haven't got time now because you've got to go be some rounds, haven't you? But linked to that is perhaps next time we'll have a part two. Is around what is salvation then? Because that's where. So that's another fascinating way as well. What is the marker? Because a lot of Christianity says you've got to get over this line. And then you're saved. I had a conversation, funny enough, with another church group I was involved with a few weeks back about what is salvation. And the Bible concept of salvation is very different to some strands of our Christianity to try and express it.
That salvation, as you say for another time, but salvation doesn't hinge on the decision I made. To say, church, I'm going to give you all this information so that you can make a sensible decision at some point. It's like selling insurance or something, properly at that point. But, to say instead, you might be becoming a more rounded person through engagement in a series of collaborations, partnerships, practices, a life lived with others, and that maybe God is actually saving us through a decision that God makes rather than a decision we make.
Well, some of the power for salvation rests in God, not us.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, exactly.
Imagine.
It'll never.
Anyway, thank you very much. That was really. We will do a part two.
Excellent.
Thanks, Mark from Yardleywood Baptist Church. You can buy his book in about 5 years.
In about 5 years, exactly. Look out for it.
Yeah. See you.
Okay. Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.